worked in like the camping office, and so there'd be so many days when I was a kid where she would just like stick us in like a meeting room with like a bunch of crayons and coloring materials and like a copy of Star Wars and be like, I'll be back in 8 hours, and like just leave.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you're listening on the day I published this, between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., here on the East Coast of the U.S., I should be back, or I will be back. I'm back at the keyboard after a month away. I took August off from the novel to work on some large home projects. After the first week, I was a cranky bastard without the writing. Soon the manual labor kind of took over, and it was a great release for my mind. But I won't lie, I'm absolutely nervous about this long break and how I'm going to re-enter the book. But I am eager to find my way back in and finish the damn manuscript. So, more to come. This week's guest is M.S. Harkness. MS came as a recommendation from a past guest and a good friend who has never steered me wrong on people to talk with and especially books to read. So after reading her book, Time Under Tension, I had to have her on the show. I have no memoir bone in my body, I think, but I really do love reading ones that captivate my attention, and hers certainly did. So she is up for the Best Graphic Novel Ignatz Award. I've put a link in the description to the ballot request page. And if you've read the book and you haven't voted, please do. Every little bit helps, I think, for everyone. You know, she can get a nice sticker to put on the book. Yeah. So this is me with MS Harkness. We were exchanging emails like a month ago. I was expressing my struggle where I was with my writing, and you're like, I'm kind of struggling too on some motivation with it. Did the Olympics help you, or are you still struggling?
They did in that, I mean, I'm sure you're dealing with this right now, like where there's only so many hours a day you can like stare in front of a desk and like beat your head at it and hope something mildly interesting comes out. So it's like, it's good to have something that's like, okay, just calm down, go do something else for a little bit, because you can't really have like much on in the background when you're writing. You kind of really do have to just be like completely unstimulated, hoping it will be good. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have something that is like a nice sneak away activity when you're writing, because it's especially with comics where I don't know if you script everything out and then you thumbnail it, or if you just kind of do both things at the same time, or whatever form that takes. But I mean, there's just like, you know, I'm sure there's a carryover, just like, we're gonna have 5 pages of something here and then we're gonna fucking figure it out later because I can't right now. So
it's funny. There's a whole bunch of thought processes, you know, about that development side of it, because, you know, it's like, you know, writing songs. Like people go like, well, what do? You come up with the melody first, you come up with the lyrics first, and like, you know, the correct answer is both. Like you don't really have like, I'm sure there are songwriters who sit down and they plink out melodies and they've got a whole box of melodies, and then they go, all right, let me think of some lyrics, and then they see which one it applies to. But I think almost writing comic books is similar if you are the person doing both tasks. Like if you're creating comics and writing them and drawing them, it's real hard to separate the two. It's a toss-up. And if you come from the drawing side initially, it's very hard to break the thumbnailing mindset of like, I'm going to tell a story from thumbnails and then turn that into, you know, words.
I'm glad you said both though, because I'm absolutely team both. I didn't want to assume, but absolutely you should be doing it. I teach sometimes, and there's like assignments where they're like, okay, well, you write a script and then you'll adapt it into thumbnails, and I'm like, just fucking do it. Together. It doesn't make any sense to separate them unless you're working with somebody else, but even then it's
and that's that might be the number one sort of solution factor is that if you are, I mean, that's why I really do encourage every sort of writer artist who I talk with to work with somebody else who's going to draw a comic for you, so you can get better at your craft of writing, because it's like cross training. To be better at a thing, you need to work on these things that aren't the thing that make you better. I was just listening to a discussion about high performance athletes, and the commonality between the sort of the top flight ones is that they did every sport. They didn't grow up saying, I only do this. They did every sport.
Kind of.
Well, Tiger Woods exception.
Well, and this is just it. We're in a lot of Nordic countries, like they don't have kids specialize right away, because why would you do that to a child? Number one, but like also your sport is your sport. Like you can cross train all you want. You want to run yourself ragged doing wind sprints, even though you're a swimmer or whatever. That the practice of doing, okay, write a script and then hand it off to somebody else, and like at least for students, like it is really helpful to have another person then work on it, because then it's like, well, these are all the words you're not saying that aren't communicating your idea appropriately. Like you need to figure out how to express yourself in both avenues. But we are masters of our craft, and we do it at the same time because we don't need to waste time anymore, because it's just only so many hours in a day. So
yeah, and you have to do what you have to do. There's also the sort of the philosophy of training scars. So we learn unless someone is standing over us saying, do this, then do this, then do this, in whatever the thing it is in the world, we are semi-autodidactic in how we come to doing things in life, and often may not be the most efficient way. We just kind of come up with a solution and we can work our way through it. And youth has a wonderful way of energizing us to power through the hours that we are, not using appropriately.
Right.
And I was really in the, beat sheet and thumbnail camp for a long time. Like I would say the majority of my years working with Marvel and DC, that's where my mind was. But when I hopped over to writing prose, I'm like, oh, I get it. It's so much quicker to change a sentence than it is to change a panel.
Yeah. Totally.
And that's where I think I felt like, because my mind isn't wired to statically think and relax and do stuff. So it was very hard for me to think that way when I was younger. I was like, oh, I'll just scribble this out, and I know what that panel is going to do.
And sometimes you do in like 6 months.
Of course I did.
Yeah.
I totally did, but it would be very hard to handle those scribbles to somebody else and say, make a comic from this. Right. The second book, is this another autobiographical thing, or are you going in that route again?
Oh yeah. This is my fourth, actually. Okay. The last one I did is like a continuation of this series. And so this is like I've run on my metaphor now, because like when I pitch it really sloppily at shows, I would always be like, this is like the Attack of the Clones of my of my youth. Like this is just like more shitty information about me. No. But no, this is like the fourth one. It'll be another long brick of a graphic novel, hopefully.
Yeah.
How long is the thing you're working on?
Well, this is a novel. And it is
no pictures.
No pictures. They're all in your head.
Oh.
And for me, this is a short book. This is an 80 to 90,000 word book, which is much shorter. I had a very strange early summer, and I just kind of skidded to this sort of halt. And I'm like, why am I stopping? I know exactly what I want to do, but I'm just not progressing where I want to, how I want to move. So I'm trying to be kind to myself and not beat myself up, which is the easiest.
It's hard when you're in the tar pit. It sucks.
Yeah. It is dreadful. I mean, I'm thankful that I have this mundane home task to try to like get myself doing something else to keep my mind completely off of it. And then
totally, I redid my entire garage studio right before I started writing on my shit. So I was like, I need to make sure this looks good for when I'm like in the tar pit.
So your Attack of the Clones, volume 2. Listen, you could call it, what is the it's your Rogue One. You can tack on that 4th book to the opening trilogy. We'll just put a 4th one in here.
Totally. Yeah, it's gonna be called Never Better. I should just call it Rogue One. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of actually at a good crossroads with it, where there's like 250 some pages and there's a kind of like, okay, now we are like over the Rubicon of like what all of this is. And I'll have to go back and edit and rewrite everything a million times, but I'm kind of like getting to like the actual like big thing that will kind of like set the stage for the end of the book, which feels really good. And I keep thinking, like, but when I get there, it will all go faster, and it will just be like diarrhea falling out of your ass. It'll just be so simple because the book will just end, and it'll be there, and we'll see. But
sticking the landing is so tough. It in a memoir world, it's because it's not so clear, you know, in your life, because there's another day, there's another thing, there's a different phone call or email.
Oh right, yeah.
We don't get these. I mean, like, okay, you graduated. Okay, there's a marker, but everything else that was happening in your life was happening the day before and happens the day after. Only that one thing stops. And
you bookend it being like, this is what the book will be about, and then you don't realize it until you're like done with it and talking to people like, what's your book about? And you're like, it's not even about that anymore. Like it's completely changed.
Totally.
And that's what's supposed to happen. That's like theoretically a good book, but at the same time, I'm at, with the book Time and Attention that I just found out I got nominated for an Ignatz for. Like,
I just saw the post. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Hopefully by the time this airs, I haven't lost to the Tamakis, but we'll see. In any case, that book is so sporadic, being like, this is about like becoming a trainer, but it's also about like sexual abuse, but it's also about like this MMA guy, and it's also about like X, Y, and Z. So it's to jump around even more in the next one and just be completely like, I'm afraid it'll be like too surface level on all those points. So it's like making sure it feels unified.
So that's interesting, because ostensibly I'm guessing this is further down the road of life. You're a bit older, as this goes on. So, life gets more complicated. It doesn't get less complicated. We think we can we can get this stuff under control and make it easier. And it never works out that way. So I can see that more would be the inevitable result of life progressing if you are making a story, from your life.
Right. It's about making sure the audience understands that, I think. Because there's nothing more fun than reading reviews of your book where it's just like, I don't know, she's kind of dumb, I don't like her. Like, moving on. Like, cool.
No, that's not a review. That's
yeah.
I think, reading Time Under Tension, which I really just like cooked right through the book, I never felt that there was too much. It was, to me, it was very like, everything was very straightforward. You had your little, river branches would come off, but you wouldn't leave them alone. They would loop back in and come back into the main storyline. So I don't feel that you fell prey to that. How do you have any writing techniques that you're employing or searching for to make sure you don't abandon these branches of your story?
Yeah, keeping track of it is hard. I think a lot of it is just trying to create symmetry through it. So as I'm like writing this book now, it's like, okay, well, if I'm kind of like putting together the whole structure of this book around like a weightlifting meet, the end's gonna have a weightlifting meet. So it's like, beginning, I need to like establish what that is and like how it works and the rules. make that visually interesting and seamlessly integrated into the narrative or whatever. But like, I don't know, like wherein you start digging through writing in the narrative and being like, okay, there's like a conversation here. You know, this character is going to come up 2 times. Okay, they need to come in a third because there's this like undulating relationship tension with them or something. Yeah, I mean, it's just making sure that all the, you know, wiring has been like put together at the very end of it, where it just, you don't have loose ends. So I think a lot of note cards, a lot of like sticky notes, and a lot of my editing process is just like, I'll, you know, wake up and be like, okay, I got to read through my shitty thumbnails to be like, what do we have today? And then just being like, okay, well, like if we already know at this point how this person feels about this, they should be more annoyed at this part of the book, like angry face, you know, just making sure that that emotional quality doesn't feel disjointed, wherein then you have like scenes where it's just going up and down wildly and you don't understand why. Really is kind of like a consistent sticky note I'm getting through my tons of sheets here.
It's kind of life, you know what I mean? Like you are in moments where things are going up and down and you don't know why, so which is can be a great device, especially early into a book, you know, where you can allow some instability to kind of push the character, you propel the character through and keep the reader kind of guessing. There's a real it seems like the dumbest, most basic thing in the, like, of course, solution that Hope Larson, so Hope is a writer and an artist who's done a ton of books, and on one of her recent books, she really struggled, like for a long time, getting her script together, to the point where the agent was like, maybe we should give back the advance. Like it was that kind of scenario.
Nightmare.
And I know, terrifying. And she ended up her agent, I think it was her agent, gave her, or maybe it was the editor, gave her this make a calendar of the time of the story, which was a sort of epistolary kind of thing that happened in a diary. And she's like, make the calendar and just write in each one of the days that take place in the story what happens. Give yourself this bench, you know, mark to kind of work through. And I was like, oh, I'm stealing that. It's like so I stole it for like, you know, for my book, because my book takes place like in a week. Like it's not a very long period of time.
Right.
So I was able to, I mean, there's a ton of stuff packed in every single day, but it was so much easier to look at and go like, okay, this makes like a sense of like, this would happen over the course of these 2 days or 3 days or whatever the thing was. And it allowed me to kind of look at it in one chunk. So I don't know if you've kind of looked at it in that sense, but if it's something that would be helpful, it would be a real great exercise.
Yeah, I mean, the last one I did, Time and Attention, is literally like I went from the book before that jumps around so much and was like so like flashbacky to some trauma event or whatever. Like I'm making this like alphabet of like emotional tones applied to the imagery, and I was like, I'm gonna just straight up like it starts all jumping around, just kind of like getting that out of its system, but then just like goes on like a year's calendar, like what you're talking about, where even if maybe the events of my life were like in the winter or whatever, if it made more sense to introduce it in the spring, I was going to do that for the sake of the narrative of like putting it all through. And that really helps too with like figuring out like what a scene is supposed to consist of like, put yourself back in that time. Like, you know, what is the difference about living in the Midwest with when you've got your like winter boots out and you need to go like dig your car out of the snow versus like being able to just get on your bike and go to work.
Right.
And like how that contributes to everything. So being able to like kind of meditate on like, you know, it's a book about myself, like the protagonist is supposed to be me. So like I should be like mining my own life for, you know, my little accoutrement that I would have at that time of the year or something. But yeah, I'm definitely trying to keep track of like all the months. It's sort of like taking the format of like a 20-week periodization training cycle for the meet. So it's like, okay, you have 20 weeks and we want to end in like December. So then what's 20 weeks out from that? Like, okay, it starts here. So So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Just even like putting together like what's going on in the background. So
I think especially if you're dealing in real world terms, what's happening in the background is super important, because the events of our lives are as big as they are, but they really don't impact too far outside of us, like maybe 1 to 2 people out of us, and then that's it. But like what's happening in the, in the neighborhood, in the city, in the state, in the country, in the world, like all those things, it's just a much bigger force. And it's
right.
kind of very cool to be able to carry that, because you can tease out themes of things that have happened in the world to mirror what might be happening in your story, to give you this kind of like, oh, okay, hey dummy, pay attention.
Yeah, the book ends on New Year's Eve, 2019 going into 2020. So
Nice.
you can
Sure.
imagine the bullshit I'm putting in there. Just like,
hey, just book the
everything's
tickets.
gonna be great. Exactly. Yeah. So fucking great. But
yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely that.
That's cool.
But
another thing I employed a lot, and this is helpful initially with multiple POV characters. So when you have a book with multiple characters, I used to just color code the sections. So whatever the different color code was, that character. So my mind was like, okay, well, this is who's going on here. And I didn't have to, so when I looked at the manuscript, I didn't have to kind of like filter through to figure out what was going on. I could just go, oh, I need to look at all the stuff with this character. And okay, I'm just looking at blue. And anytime there's blue, I know what I'm thinking about.
And it's so handy because then you can go, okay, there's so much blue. Like yellow needs a turn.
Right.
Like you can
like
make a percentage. Like you have like percentages for like, okay, there's not enough equivalence here. Like, how do we make this work for this person or whatever? So.
Totally. I try so very hard in the work, the process of the work, to accommodate my visual nature, because when you're writing prose, there's very little room for that. So I have to go like, well, what does my brain need? Like, what does my brain need to understand the bigger shapes of this story, so I can put them all together to go, okay, yeah, this helps. And
right.
So, so if, in the current book, it's only a single POV. So I'm using color for through lines. So, okay, well, this red thing is this storyline, and the blue is this story, and black is the main storyline. You just kind of figure out what you're looking at, whether it's in the outline phase or an actual script.
That's something I'll probably end up doing once I get it all done. And like right now I have like that for scenes where it's like, how long are we spending, or even total of the book, like in this bar, this restaurant, this gym, and being like, okay, this feels democratic or not. But yeah, to make sure you don't end up some weird ass direction and you're like 20 pages in and you're like, well, that was a week of work I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna actually make the final cut.
Yeah. Well, I remember with Noah Van Sciver, when he was talking about doing his his
Mormon book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And which is it's so great. But it's so much bigger than it was that he was originally contracted to do, because he's like, I just kept coming up with stuff and figuring things out, and so it have grew and evolved. And also he went back and would change artwork. I'll go back 100 pages and change stuff. I'm like,
he's such a cartoonist.
Never do that.
It's terrifying.
He's amazing. Yeah, I know. I mean, he's so prolific, but it's always good. It's never just pages for page sake. It's funny that the older I get and down the road, the more I realize like the story, the script, the character, like that's the propellant, that's the backbone, that's everything. The artwork that's created is the joyous expression that gets to happen from this sort of this initial inspiration.
Yeah. I got to take a memoir class where I was like, I know I don't want my books as like an elder statesman of graphic memoir to feel like teen poetry. And so I was like implored to do like an online workshop with like people who are writing and had no fucking idea that people make comics, which was amazing and great. Just to get insight on more literary practices, but then, you know, you'd show your comic to them because it'd be like, this is what I did. Like, you know,
Right.
I don't know how well you can give me feedback on this. And I'm like, that was really cool. You know, like they're like, just it's too shiny and new for them to like really dig into, you know, what they're seeing, what the characters are saying, like how that could be relayed better. But yeah, I really do. I feel grateful to be a cartoonist because you have so many more options, which can limit you if you don't know like all the different weapons at your disposal. But yeah, I mean, when you're writing just feels like you're on a unicycle and it's so hard to balance everything.
It's tough. I mean, I don't know why I went that route. I don't know why I didn't say like, listen, I have a lifetime of drawing experience and I love to create stories, just make graphic novels. But I don't know. There was a different calling in my mind. I still love writing comic books.
There's some things you got to do. I don't know.
But I don't want to draw them as much as I used to. Although when I sit and hang out and talk with artists, I go like, you know, I get that little thing goes and like, maybe I should. I'm like, dude, come on. Like the amount of work it takes to draw a comic book is redonkulous. It's so labor intensive.
I just writing is, I mean, it should be compulsive for writers who only write, but like at the same time I feel like there's, you know, with drawing at least you can tread water by drawing. Like even if you're not sure, you can like do a compulsive like shaking of like your body to like get something out, whereas writing I feel like there's so much more ennui of just being like, I know this isn't gonna work, but I gotta write for 3 hours and it's all just gonna suck. So
well, you can see your mistakes as you make them when you're drawing.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like it's like, oh, that's not working, and you even if you can't fix it at that moment, at least you can recognize it, and you could come back fresh and go, okay.
And it's definitively bad.
Yes,
there's no question. You just know.
Right, but when it's a bunch of words, you know, on a screen or on a printout, it's so hard to see the whole thing at once and go, oh, well, there's what's wrong. Maybe it's the fact that that's the matter. Like that's the thing that I want to tackle and you know, in the challenge. I don't know. I mean, not that I've mastered drawing. You know, there's never a master of drawing. You're always struggling. You're always when there's anything. It's you just.
And someone's like, I'm writing a book. It's like I'm running a marathon.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, cool, okay. Like,
right.
Good for you. You know, just
I'll go have lunch and see how that turns out for you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's tough, but it will be very meaningful to you when it's done.
Yeah. I mean, finishing every book is great. I love finishing the books. You know, or as the phrase goes, you don't finish a book, you stop writing a book, because left to your own devices, you'll just keep screwing with it for.
You set a date.
Right, or somebody takes it away from you. Okay, that's enough.
Yeah,
we'll just do something with this now. Why comics for you?
Like I kind of said earlier, I feel like number one, I was a kid who liked drawing and just drew constantly and enjoyed doing that, and I still do. But like I think, you know, we don't have enough money to be filmmakers. You know, like we don't have that kind of wherewithal. I'm just assuming. Maybe I don't know you that well, but I would think that you would be too busy to. I think you would be too busy to talk to me if you were making a movie. But yeah, like that's too hard. You'd have to wrangle too many people. I think just at my core, I can be very like, this is how it's going to be done. Like I know what I'm doing, and like you can try and talk me out of it, but I'll probably like very quickly be like, no, you know, like I don't take criticism amazingly.
Yeah.
And that lends itself to being like an antisocial cartoonist who is the writer artist of their thing. And when I was in school, I got a degree in comics because no one stopped me. And
same.
Yeah. So. Where did you go?
I went to SVA.
Okay. I went to MCAD. So I tutored SVA.
Wait, was Paul Fricke your teacher?
He was not my teacher, but he taught there, and we like I'd see him all the time at stuff. So he's great. I take his like online lessons. I'll like show students of mine now because I'm like Paul's got it. I don't need to try and cop this. But I don't know what the fuck I thought I was gonna do as far as like if I was gonna like work for Image or Marvel or something. I only read a handful of like American superhero comics, and I had no idea about indie comics until I got to college, and it was like I mean my whole time of my childhood and my early adolescence and my 20s, I was a fucking train wreck of a person who needed to really like learn how to exist. And so like doing a 24-hour comic about like almost having sex at the airport like hits really well in crit when everyone's really tired and can't think, that they like will chuckle at that. So initially just like super self-deprecating, kind of undergroundy, you know, look how fucked up I am, haha kind of comics. Then trying to like dig my way out of just being like a clown. So
well, you win if you're the one pointing out the problem, you know. So you like, hey,
a little, but then they get used to you doing that, and then they're like, we don't want to just see her suffer. Like, what if she had a good time? And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy, right? So I mean, like, I credit like, you know, my practice of like, you know, self introspection for an audience, in addition to like weightlifting and personal training for like helping me figure my life out. I get to sit here in my climate controlled sort of studio gym in my own home, which is pretty crazy. Not something I could have not something I could have imagined like ever in my life. Very like stable and happy and married, and I love my husband. That's the mode I'm at now. So so now I just gotta like peruse through my diaries and be like, what happened? How much cocaine did we do that day?
At least it's good you took you put the records down, you know? Like I wonder what the percentages of people who were journalers. How do you say that? Yeah, I guess who journaled and write memoir. Like I think I got to believe that there's a fair amount of.
I would say it's a pretty standard practice, especially if you're like, I have to write today and I don't know what I'm going to write about, so I might as well just like take inventory. I don't do it nearly as much anymore because I just am like too used to my own what are we doing today kind of voice, and I don't really get too much, I don't know, epiphany out of it per se, but it is very handy to just be like, when did this happen, and be able to go back. So
you said you'd probably read 2 American comic books at the, you know, to a point, but what mainstream, like what were you reading then?
X-Men.
No, I mean outside of that, like I mean, were you reading? So I mean, like I mean, no, I guess I mean, for me the picture was pretty clear. You know, I'm like, oh, I love, you know, I love comic books. I enjoy the superhero stuff. So, and you know, this is pre the real huge indie boom. Right. So I'm like, well, there's jobs there. I could go draw comic books, and I can, you know, draw whatever superhero comic book they have got there. All right, that's what I want to do, and that's really where I, you know. But you didn't have a focus, like to think, well, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, interestingly enough, when I was like in high school, I was like one of these, you remember like the little goth kids of like the aughts, like the Hot Topic children. Like I was like a Jonan Vasquez fan with like my Invader Zim shirt on. So I remember getting like the Johnny Director's cut where he talks about just like drawing and like pitching to like slave labor graphics way back in the day. So like I would go on LiveJournal and like see photos of like all of these people of like slave labor graphics at like shows, being like, what is Alternative Press Expo? And like, you know, I've now heard 1,000,001 like, you know, horror stories about all this various time frame and like the kind of show circuit of that period. But I guess I got the idea there that I could just make something and try and find a home for it just by like being, what if I was in high school and I just wanted to like make a single issue thing? But like I didn't really know that like I could be kind of part of this like cycle of either people that wanted to do like a one-man anthology thing or just do like mini comics until I was in college. And then I was reading like, you know, like my teacher was Kevin Huizinga, so I was like just reading like his collection of like weird Fort Thunder comics or like Gabrielle Bell or Julie Doucet, people that are, you know, on some kind of continuum of like have done the things that I've done now, and have like good big collections of things that were like, you know, in a period of like the 90s or whatever. So that like gave me more of a context of just like what has been and what could I do, I guess. I would say probably Chester Brown being like the thing that I like point to and be like, our brains are very similar about the way we think about how panels should look and like how things are supposed to be composed. I was really happy I got to meet him on my tour last year. I had not like talked to him before.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. It was like, it was very like, okay, I've made a comic. Now what do I do with it? Okay, you go to a show, and then you meet people at the show, and then you travel to other shows, and then you do little indie book tour. It kind of did feel like Candyland in the way of like you jump over 3 squares and then you roll again and figure out what the hell you're gonna do. Because like there's no like necessarily right or wrong, especially now. Like, I mean, I think the thing that they were telling, I don't know what they told you at SVA, like make business cards and hand them out to people, right? But I think they were trying to get us to hashtag all of the shit that we would put on Twitter or something, and that was gonna like make it, that was gonna really make it happen for us. Or Tumblr was really big, like when I was in school. So that was like, you have to have a Tumblr, and then you have to have like a big cartel before you have a website or something. So everything, yeah, like, students ask me now what they're supposed to do, and I'm like, make things.
Yeah, and I think we're so often distracted by whatever the latest technology is, as if that's going to be the answer to it. And while it may be an avenue and an answer for a great many people to get themselves out there, you know, I don't think anything beats making contact with people. Like,
right.
That's the way to do it. There's no other. Like, the indie world in so many ways is so much like the punk rock scene. You know, you're going from like small, you know, third tier city to third tier city, playing in small venues and sleeping on people's couches, and
totally,
if you're lucky. But that's like, I think that's how those connections get built. And then when somebody has some fortunate break, and then their editor's like, well, you know, who should I talk about? You know, who should I see next? And they go, you should go talk to MS, you know, and then
my friends.
Next thing you know,
yeah,
right. Yeah. And it's just sort of spreading of the love, because aside from, you know, if you want to go the YA middle grade route with actual book publishers to do a graphic novel, but that's subjectively very different. You have to kind of like blaze your own trail to do these independent books and figure out, like, find the publishers who are like, yeah, I want to do this. This is great. Fantagraphics. Yes, let's do it.
Totally. And I don't know, like,
cool.
what your family expected of you with going to SVA. I definitely didn't feel pressure to, like, per se have, you know, any one thing, but it was like very important to my mom that I went to school. So it was kind of like, okay, if you're gonna do fucking underwater basket weaving, you have to get like a master's in it or something. And I was like, didn't know any better, so it was just like, okay, go do it. And I mean, I really feel like the time I had with Kevin Huizinga was invaluable. I don't know if all that other shit was, but yeah, I mean, I think that I'm very happy with where I'm at now, considering the state of the world. So
yeah, well, it's so interconnected. Like I you know, I go down those rabbit holes internally, you know, and I'm like, but like none of it, there's no way of being here doing what I can do now if all that other stuff that was, you know, arguably if there's just a line and there's, you know, good choice and mistake,
Right.
And there's no gray area in the middle, which of course is life. You get a fair amount of mistakes made, but you're not where you are if you don't make those things. So if you made all the good choices, you're doing something else completely.
Yeah. I am like in where, like I have 19, 20-year-olds be like, what should I do? Being like, I don't want you to get a BFA if, you're sleeping on the floor and, your whole family needs you to like work for them, or like there's so many caveats of like my experience is different. Also I work very, very hard. Or at least I did for a long time in my 20s. I think I can relax a little bit now, but yeah, I mean, it's I don't know, just crazy. So
yeah, it is tough when you are in school, because it's super fun and distracting at every point. Staying focused on the task of whatever the thing that you want to do and how you go about doing it. Being in school in New York City is very helpful if you want to be in the publishing business that's happening in New York City.
Right.
That was I don't know if that was no master plan. That was just dumb luck. If your life is rough and chaotic, which, as I've read, your life was a bit rough and chaotic, just a skosh. What like, so, I mean, like, when did is fitness part of your mental health?
I would say so, yeah. It's kind of hard to point to like the exact thing it does, because I think for a lot of people it's just like this kind of like all encompassing, like, I know I will feel better if I just go to the gym and go and do it. And it's hard to articulate, like, but I don't know, there's so many health benefits to doing it. I'm a trainer too, so like my job is, expounding on this constantly, but it's for being a lady, like, it's good for my bones. It's just a really stabilizing force of just being like, I know this many times a week I will be doing these things, and they're kind of non-negotiable. They keep my brain intact. And like when I was running around the country touring, like I got a Planet Fitness membership because I could just run into any one of those in the country, and hit those up. And that was like, I mean, even just for like, I am basically living out of my car. Like, like there's plenty of people who are in way more unstable situations, because like, and getting one of those memberships is invaluable because you can go in and shower and like, be like, okay, the day starts now. So plenty of times pulling over the car over in the middle of the road, in like, random place in North Carolina, making sure that I would get down to Florida okay. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things in my life, I think.
Was it an intentional thing, or was it some surprise thing?
I really have to credit like the YMCA for like kind of just being in my life all throughout my life. My mom worked in like the camping office, and so there'd be so many days when I was a kid where she would just like stick us in a meeting room with like a bunch of crayons and coloring materials and like a copy of Star Wars, and be like, I'll be back in 8 hours, and like just leave. And we just like run havoc. We would go to like the basketball court or the pool and just be horrible children running around terrorizing people. And so like when I got older, I got like a lifeguarding certificate, and it was kind of like, how many different places at the Y can I work? I worked in the camping office too. And my first job for training was at a Y, where I basically just like went from the pool to the gym, and did that basically until COVID stopped me from doing it. So so I think more than anything, like the health club aspect of just like being a member at that basically since I was a toddler or something, like just that's the place you go to and you spend some time there, and it's a great place.
It's a community.
Totally. And yeah, now that I'm like, in the point of my life where I'm like trying to think about, okay, well, if I'm going to have a family, being like, I would much rather go to like the Y than some more like Lifetime. This is like just gym politics or something. But like a nice nonprofit that feels like very, very much like the same stabilizing force that I had, and throw your kids there. let them be babysat by somebody else in a really fucked up way. But yeah, I think that more than any like weightlifting routine, or like group class or something, where I think for a lot of people it's like, I do yoga, I do this one thing. So
kind of makes sense. Like if this is a sort of a space you grew up in to a degree, and then if you're, it's part of your life. So, but it's a stable force.
Yeah, and like there's so many people that like I don't know, like just came in and out because they were lifeguards or they worked the front desk. So that like you can find them on Facebook now and see how they're doing. So
right, yeah, because it's a theme within your book and your upcoming book. Like this is a part of your life, and I seems to me it's probably been a very a healing part of your life.
Yeah, and I like try and things like healing or mental health and stuff where like I don't think we're being woo-woo at all here, but like it can be really easy to get like woo-woo language in it wherein it just becomes therapy brained. I'm always trying to like strip down to like okay, what is like the common language of like what I'm trying to get across here, and it's just like where we talk about like third places and things like that. Like I didn't grow up like religious at all, so I could easily see like if my family was like it would have been like going to church or something like that, where it's just like not even about the sermon, but it's like who are the people you're seeing like every week, just like what's Ted doing, what's Danny doing, and just being present and like accountable in the way that you show up with your pants on to see them. So but.
All right, so you get through school. Like, so what's the, like, I mean, I know a lot of people who graduated from art school, in the cartooning department, and how hard it was for them, and how they didn't have a clear sort of vision, or they hadn't done enough preparation. They didn't train hard enough. So when they got out of school, they just like, and that was it. Like there was it was a tough to watch it happen.
Totally.
Like, were you like in school obsessively focused on your craft? Was that the thing? And
I had my senior thesis was my first book, so like that was great because it became something other than just like a school project. And that was way longer than like I think like most seniors like in comics departments do like a single issue for their like you color it, you do everything. I did Tinderella, which is like a 120 page book where I just like inked a certain amount of pages, but I drew the rest of them before the end of the semester. And before I graduated, I already had like a home studio set up. Like I was very much like, I will not have a lapse in work between graduating and doing my thing. I wanted to make sure I had a job that was like about, making sure that I had like at least 4 days a week just to draw. And so it helped that like Trump got in office and was like, everyone was freaking out that like all the arts funding was going to just be immediately cut. Like that was like right when I got out of school. So it was very much like, I guess I'll just like become a personal trainer in the event that, like I can't be an artist for some reason. And so, getting proficient at that kind of over the course of like the summer that I graduated, like, basically time under tension, that helped me ink a whole graphic novel,
Okay.
So I think like so much of it is just luck. Like so many people we know not only like don't really figure it out, but also are super fucking talented, and like maybe they just go a completely other route and they're super happy with that, and they don't have all this like weird pent up frustration about their college degree or like some dream that they didn't fulfill. And like that's great if they can just do the thing that they want to do and aren't like in some weird tar pit about it. But yeah, I mean, there's so many kids I work with who just like are not, mature enough to be in college as far as just like being on top of their wake up on time, take your meds, eat a meal that's not just brown,
right? Work
on your shit. Maybe go to your other job if you have a job, or do your chores. And so it's like you're trying to talk to them about, 40 comics brain shit of like, how it makes sense to put this on this page or whatever. And they're like not even hearing you because they're just like having a panic attack because you're like not just like co-signing everything they do. And some of that's COVID, some of it's generational, some of it is just age group. But I was in college and I was slightly older when I was in college. Like I was a couple of years older and I had a car and I had multiple jobs while I was in college. And so it was like, this is the amount of time I have to work on my shit. I have to do it. So, yeah, I mean, and there's, you know, there's plenty of problems with that or whatever. Like I didn't have enough time to be a college student or have like some college experience or whatever. Or, I don't know. I'm fine.
Yeah, but it's I mean, it's like this whole thing of like, you know, the life you get is the life you have. Like it's not the life that you want. Yeah. That's not your life. And so you just, okay, there's nothing wrong.
Well, and it's just so like, go to school so you can do your job. And so the students are in school and they're like, well, I'm here to make sure I get my comics job at the comics factory. And it's like,
there is no comics factory.
Right. So, you know, you need to go out and you need to go to shows. And they're like, well, I don't know how to go there. And it's like,
right.
Cool. Spend all this money for no reason. So it's frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, I have some friends who, you know, who are teachers in various different places. And one of them just goes, they don't know, like they don't know. And like, you just go, okay, well, hey, here, do the assignment. They go, oh, hi. And it's just never you get one student who like is on top of it and the rest of them are just kind of bumping into the corner. You know, they all settle into the corners of the room. And you're like, okay, let me get the dust broom out and pull you guys out.
And it's almost like I would almost wish there was like 100 students in the room for like Comics 101. So it's like, all right, we're gonna figure out whose names I remember, right? But it, you know, they're very emotional. They care a lot about it. They just don't know how to apply that. And then I'm like, you know, pent up in all of my like just having graduated like less than 10 years ago. So I'm like, if you don't do this, you'll die. And I'm just like, you're not gonna make it. And like they don't respond well to that. So it's tough. Like I'm taking this semester off. I'm filling out some grants. So hopefully I won't have to do it again. But yeah, it's not because of any like one student. It's just the sadness factory that is, you know, places like SVA or CCAD or MCAT or what have you.
I remember. It was about the 2-year mark is when I said like I can't teach all the time. Like I had to stop because it took a lot out of me, and you know, it was just the things like, oh, okay, you're just not willing. You know, by and large, group mind, you know, you're not willing to do this.
Yeah,
you know, that's okay. That's and then it came a question to me like, am I willing to sit and struggle with them not willing to do something? Like, okay, I'm not, and that's fine. I mean,
I'm too. I sit in the car for too long, just like agonizing over their futures to really keep putting myself there. But it is really helpful where, I don't know, with your teaching practice, because I mean, at least the first few years, it's like, oh, well, now I know how to like do everything better because of how to explain it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody, like, it's like I was saying, write a script.
Right.
Because you'll get better as a comic book artist if you write a script.
Yeah.
Because you'll have to figure things out without the crutch of a pencil.
Right.
And teaching, that's when I learned how to process. Like I mean, no joke. I went from drawing, you know, people in tights having fights to teaching advertising and graphic design.
Right.
And I had to figure and I said, oh, it's the same solution system. Like it's just, there's nobody punching somebody on this thing. It's an ad. It's coming up with the solution for an ad or a packaging thing. Oh, okay. And it was, so by dissecting everything that was the artifice of whatever the thing is, which is whether it's idiosyncratically of whatever you do, you know, as a memoirist, or me as a superheroist, new word, and then taking all that away and saying, okay, what is left? How do you get to that solution? Now, stick it to something else.
Right.
And that way you can say, okay, folks, here's how you do this.
Yeah, it is all related, and it really is like, you learn how to be a disciplined student or a person who can solve problems, and on the continuum of that. So,
because it's the ability to solve problems is the greatest creative career skill you can have.
Right.
Because you could take that anywhere. It fits really into a small box.
Right.
You don't have to have a whole lot. You don't need all these reference books. You don't need any of that stuff.
Right.
Because it's just it's a skill system you develop and you're able to apply to anything. So because listen, if there were 25 of us who graduated in SVA to be comic book creators, not many of them were comic book creators, especially for the first 5 years.
Who are the other people in your class? Because like I can name a couple of mine that are like the people at shows where it's like
yeah. And mind you, it was, like I said, it was a very different world. So it's, very much Marvel DC world.
Sure,
so
yeah.
Mark Morales, who is just a top-notch inker, probably one of the best inkers in the business, one of my classmates, and I still curse to this day why I didn't know he was such a good inker. Nelson DeCastro, who is another notable comic book guy. I'm trying to think all the people we had around us. Well, John Paul Leon was one of the students I went to school with, and Sean Martinbrough and Kevin McCarthy, Brett Lewis, like a bunch. There was a great number of people who had really good careers, but it took a long time for like Mark didn't get work for years.
Yeah.
And it took him a long time to get into it. And then when he did, he found his thing, and turns out he was really bloody good at it.
Mm-hmm. Rosemary Valero O'Connell was like a grade above me, but she's younger, and it was like I was like she's like John Cena of like our school, being like everyone's like Rosemary's gonna do great, and I was like Randy Orton, just like fucked up in the corner, like I'm the sleeper agent, you don't know. But like Jenna Cha, also another, she was legit in my grade. She's doing great. Her and her husband are like a dynamic duo team. She got Canadian citizenship, so
look at her.
She skidded above us in the way of making sure that her life's fucking figured out. But yeah, I mean, plenty of other super talented people that have been completely either kneecapped by life or by like injuries, where it's just like their back went out drawing, and like
it's so physically
just
debilitating.
Yes. So
you know what, you probably there's your 1,000-dare idea. You could have some sort of online exercise training system for artists, because
I've tried it.
God,
artists don't have enough money to make it worth my time. Ultimately, you're making a fitness program for sedentary people that don't enjoy moving, so that's a hard sell for most. So
they do not.
No.
I think the biggest thing I ever did when I was young and getting in the business was, listen, we're all night owls by nature, artists, over by ourselves doing our thing. And I realized, like, all my friends who have jobs, like, they're done at 5 and 6 o'clock. And if I'm just like getting underway as an artist, like I'll be up till 3, I don't get to hang out with any of my friends ever.
Right.
So I shifted my whole schedule around to start in the morning.
Well, that's just like what's important to you too, where it's like, I think that's always like a really helpful exercise for students, being like, do you want to live in a certain part of the country? Do you want to have a house with a bunch of dogs in it? Do you want to have kids? Like, you need to be making your creative career choices based on those things, because if those are like your non-negotiables, like, being up till 5 a.m. every day, and like your hands cramping because you're playing video games and you're trying to work on a comic and you're working in like a kitchen, like, capitalism sucks and everything and it's terrible, but like you need to kind of make choices actually, instead of just like having your choices made for you. So
yeah, if anybody is listening to this who is thinking like, if they were asking you those questions, I think I would add to that, listen to Paul Fricke's interview with Sean Murphy and listen to how Sean Murphy thinks about making comic books.
Totally. I've put on just so much of his stuff like while I'm working, just in the background. And
Sean's approach to making, listen, he's making big name comic books for DC, but he's not putting himself in a position where he is the hired talent,
right?
And at the bottom of the food chain, he's not seeing himself in that position, and nor should anybody.
Yeah,
you really when you are making the thing, you're making the thing that the company that is you're working with doesn't exist if you don't make it.
Yeah.
So your value is super high, and it's not to say that, hello, graduate from school, you deserve to have the $400 page rate. No, that's not going to happen. You have to get yourself to that position. But the bottom line is, don't be the person who's like, oh, whatever,
Yeah. I'll do whatever you want. I'm sorry for being here.
I'm sorry for being here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for doing this thing.
I'm so sorry you gave me the job.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The sorry people drive me bonkers. Who they're always saying sorry. I'm like, stop it.
Yeah.
Just stop. Don't stop saying you're sorry.
It's okay. I want to talk to you. It's fine.
Yeah, that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
It's okay. If I didn't want to talk to you, I'd turn around and walk away. It's okay. I think it was Tyrell Cannon who recommended
Hell
Time
yeah.
Under Tension.
I'm glad we shout out Tyrell. He's the bomb.
Yeah. He's great. And he did not steer me wrong. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very meta talking with you when you're talking about yourself graduating from college and trying to figure out, because I'm like, I know this story.
Mm-hmm.
So
spoiler, I did graduate. Yeah, no.
Okay. But it's interesting how you were saying that your first book was what you were working on while in school. And then in your third book, you're actually like using that whole story. So it's so interesting how it's folding back in, like your story is actually folding back into itself as you are moving along.
Well, and I try not to do the thing because it's just like, I find it very passe when it's like, I am a cartoonist. Here is my book about cartooning. This is what I do. So I just talked about it for too long. Where, I'm like, okay, well, I am a cartoonist and like a big chunk of my life is just sitting at a desk. So it's like, we have to do a couple shots of like me drawing at my fucking desk. Yeah. But I don't want to waste time being like, here's why I'm showing you this right now. So I broke that promise to myself to not just be like, boo-hoo, I'm a cartoonist, it's the worst thing. To put in some kind of like mirror imagery of like, okay, I'm trying to get this book off the ground. I'm trying to become a personal trainer. Like I'm trying to just like get everything in order now that I don't have the structure of school or something over my life. But yeah, I mean, not to poo-poo maybe a couple people we can think of that have made books about of being a cartoonist who's a cartoonist, but I just don't want to make a boring book. Inside Baseball or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how interested people would be in that, in the naveling hunt.
Well, they're not until I can draw them in the book, and then they're like, "This is the best book ever." Like, you're in it.
Yeah,
you're
sure.
Biased, whatever. Shut up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So,
what would you say aside from Chester? I mean, who were the people you were, I guess, who were you thinking about when you first got out of school and you were making books, and then who are you thinking about now, like that are like within arm's reach when you're working?
Like I love Chester. There's quite a few panels in Time and Attention that I like, had to hold up to his face, and I was like, "You, this is me copying you," and he was like, "Oh, good, okay." I mean, I just came off doing this giant screen print where I really wanted to like kind of nail down like something between like a Hernandez brother and like a Archie comic look to it. So like I had a blot of both of them on my table, just proportionally trying to make sense of that. With this next one I'm looking at a lot of Carol Tyler, another Ohio lady. God bless her. She's going to be putting out a big behemoth of a book that I hope wins all the awards. and just the way that she has just the most wild layouts for things that there's times where it's like you are staring at it for so long because you're like, what the fuck am I looking at, right? Like you're seeing a million different little bits, and sometimes they don't always add up, I will say. I mean, I think that like she is so just like trying to articulate something that is just like so personal and like has so, you can only imagine just the infinite amount of depth in like what she's trying to talk about, where it's like, there's like so many Easter eggs that like only she knows about with like what she's talking about. And like we're all just better for, not even necessarily being in on the joke, but just like the visual imagery that she can apply to a page. And so I want to love drawing so much that I could like pull off something that complicated with like several instances and scenes where it's just like, okay, you have to stare at this for 20 minutes because like that's how much shit I put in here. And like a lot of going back and I don't know, looking at Julie Doucet or like Uli Lust or for lack of better words, just like girls who done did it or whatever before me who are doing memoir. There's some men who did good stuff too. I got the new Joe Matt. I'm kind of like reading a page at a time to just like slowly get through it so I don't read it too fast. But even like a lot of like what I want to do too is just like looking at lettering and like graphic design from like I don't know, like the kind of like late 19th century to even just like 50s and 60s, like kind of modern graphic design lettering and stuff. So I don't know, I'm just like the more that someone clearly loves drawing and like clearly takes the time, even though like it could be faster if you did it digitally, or it could be faster, or if you just trace part of the background or something, like I get just so geeked out on like shit like Tyrell makes, where it's just like, you clearly give a shit. Like, this is so fun being able to look at it. And to like really like marinate on a scene from my own life and be like, what was this feeling? Like, what was this time in this place pre-COVID, where it's like, who was I then? So to be able to go back and like actually kind of get like some euphoria from times that might be challenging, but like ultimately are like so much a part of who you are, and just like celebrate them now that you're on the better side of it is like great and fun and like something that like as you get older and you're like, what the fuck am I even like, what do I care, like why bother with telling this story, like to really think about it on like a panel to panel level of like, this is awesome, I want to say this, it's worth putting out, because I don't, it's a point in writing where you're like, oh, this part is boring because I don't know what it is yet, and I don't want it to just feel like an old thing I did because this is just how my brain works, and like that kind of suffering, getting out of that. So,
well, I mean, that's the rewriting process.
Yeah,
getting it out first, it's okay. It's you can sit back and go, it's gonna suck. Yeah. It's okay that it sucks. It's fine. Nobody's gonna get hurt that this sucks because no one's going to see this. This gets rewritten and it gets revised, and then you fix all the problems. I think that's a consistent fear that people have who want to do something great, that they don't realize that even the people who are great, it still sucks when they first do it, because they're okay with that.
Yeah,
you just got to go through. You got to go through it. So the memoir world is like, to me, third rail kind of shit, it's like I'm very waspy. I grew up in New England. Okay. I have a very good sense of boundaries when it comes to my life in so many ways. And when I see people who do what you're doing or what Noah does or what Kayla E does, I just go, God, good on you. Like, I mean, bravo, because it's so hard. It's so hard.
It is and it isn't. Like, it would be hard for you to do it, but like,
sure,
but it's like, like cultural, like where you're like, we don't fucking all say what we're thinking. What the fuck, like that's not part of who I am, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think God bless my mom for having like zero boundaries with so many things. it wasn't even like I'm afraid of what could happen if like I say this, like in so many ways. Cause like when my parents were like splitting up and like it was like a fucking court case because of all the shit that had gone on in my childhood. My mom just like blogged about the entire thing the whole time.
Wow. Okay.
I was like, here's all these names. Here's what I'm thinking today. And yeah, and it's like I can't imagine number one doing that now or like with my kids or to my kids or anything. I can't imagine making memoir about my family as I would create it into the future. I can't even think about like putting my kids' theoretical online, you know, like with all of like so many people are like doing exactly like what memoir people are being lauded as brave for by just like oversharing and like showing themselves crying on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like there's something very deeply fucked up and selfish about what those people are doing. Right. So it's like to be like, you know, God bless you for doing what you do. Like I already know, like, through my process, like, so many points that I've done it for, like, completely narcissistic, stupid, fucked up reasons. And so, now that I'm here with it, like, you know, and now I'm stuck to some extent, like, this is what I'm doing. It's, I don't know, it's so much more about, like, reevaluating all of the events for what makes a good story at the end of the day, right? Because, like, to be like, oh, well, this just happened in my life, and this is just, you know, this is life, and this is just the day-to-day, and you're like, I'm competing with, like, Rogue One, you know what I mean? Like, if I just am like, my story is my story, and I can't change anything, and, you know, whatever, it's gonna fucking suck, you know? Because, like, you have to figure out how to curate and, like, make it good, so... For sure. And... I don't even like feel like I'm going off at you or anyone who's not in the room right now, but it's like it's the kind of thing where like I don't even it's just compulsive on my part. Like the lady who has like 2 drinks and then just starts offloading onto you about some like way fucked up shit that's like way uncomfortable. Like I'm doing the exact same thing, but just I'm not in the room. Like you have a recording of my voice, so it's like, and it's very well rehearsed, and there's like something Andy Kaufman about it, but that's like how I have to be about it because it's just like I don't know, man.
I love that you're open to the fact that you have to craft the telling of the story of your life versus just because I there are people who I know that I know you need to get it out. Yeah. And that's great. And I hope it really does what you want it to do in the long run. But don't open up to me by saying like, oh, I've had a very, very, like my life is really, really interesting. Like, oh, okay, cool. Good luck with that. Right. Because like I know like there's no way I want to read what you're going to put down ever, because your source isn't one of exploration or communication or healing. It is this attention.
It's a leather jacket. It's like a big leather jacket.
They are fucking cool. But leather jackets are cool. Let's be honest, right?
Yes, but it's so frustrating because again, like so much of just nonfiction comics is like this would have been cool if it wasn't a fucking PowerPoint, like that, you know, or if you just took your ego out of this and stripped it down to something that's just like slightly just offset. Yeah, like
if you could look at it with if you could take it away from being about you and place some objectivity into the telling of this story, you would end up with a much better end result. Absolutely. Often. Yeah. More often than not, I guess. Yeah. So graphic design. I think I you know, when I'm hearing you say like, you know, looking at old type or graphic design, I really feel, because your work is super graphic in that, to use that term loosely, your willingness to put black down on the page, which is not not of your age, your generation's nature. There's not a lot of that. They're like, I can just color this in Photoshop or, whatever the coloring tool of the day is.
Right.
And I think that's like the beauty of it. Like, you mentioned Los Bros Hernandez. I mean, like that whole, like what they brought forward from the early 80s till today, is this sort of solidity of the black and white artwork, which hard to beat. It doesn't get much better than that. And I think I look at the work and I'm like, there's so much interesting use of line and pattern along, that you mix in with your composition and your panel layouts, which is really quite nice to see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never felt terribly compelled to start adding in color. I mean, I've done things in color just where it's like part of the group project or something, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I still do print some of my own stuff and it's way cheaper.
Yeah.
So like there's always that, but yeah, I mean, I just really feel like it's just how my brain works for comics. It's just like the layout of everything and just like how it relates to how things are written and penned out. Just is like almost like space holding. It's all about keeping it within those like that binary. So, and yeah, you do it traditionally, and then you sell that page for so much money. It feels so good.
Yeah.
So much more money than you would get for any kind of advance or royalties or anything. So
that's the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also doing that, it forces you to solve the problems. Because if you're saying, well, I'll just make this color and that color, and that people will know it's a different thing, in the coloring process. But if you don't have that to fall back on, you have to solve that problem and make it work.
Totally.
And that's I think that's it, to me. That's the I don't know. What is it? They say before you start breaking the rules, do the things under the rules, and then you can start breaking them,
right.
Which I think is kind of important. I think we all, and I get the impulse. I mean, we all are we're all enthusiastic, and we want to charge way out there as far as we can get, as quickly as we can get. But the problem is like you're completely unsupported at that point, and that's it can be a quick way to sour your experience.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, like starting from square one, where it's like understand how light works first before you get any other toys. So much more helpful initially starting out. So
well, I agree. So when did you the new book, the next book, book 4, Rogue One, when did you start working on it? Like, when did you say, like, okay, I'm going to sit down and start putting this together? I mean, I'm sure you had ideas floating in the ether.
I was collecting a lot of ideas, just writing things down in the middle of the night as necessary. I mean, just like the moment time and attention was like done. And like, you finish a big project, and a lot of it is like, I don't want to do something like this again. Like, or I don't want to even think about a graphic novel. I want to think about doing minis for a while. And then you eventually come back around of being like, wouldn't it be interesting if I like told a story like this? Or like, I'm doing a thing with my next book where like, cause I change the hair every book just to give myself another problem. I'm doing a thing where I only have one eye of my main character showing, because I have like stupid hair that like does this. So I'm like, I'm gonna have like that, and then I'm gonna have like enough hair on top to be like a whole other head. So you can already imagine like all the problems I'm making for myself with doing that. But like, coming up with dumb shit like that, where it's like, okay, I want this hair, and I want like, I want like multiple timelines or something. I'm gonna do like a whole meta narrative going through the book, to like be one line of the story going at one time. So coming up with more plates to spin is super fun, in theory, until you have like 10 of them overhead and you're like, how are we gonna end this? But I've been really diligently forcing myself to like thumbnail and write since I got back from my honeymoon in June.
June, yeah.
So,
by the way, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm doing that right now. I'm very close to being done. It's very exciting just to have the first pass done. I'm gonna go and do so much golf. Get done. It should be nice out and watch so much football when I'm done. But yeah, and I'm like writing all these grants so that way theoretically I'll get like money to just make it next year. I want to get to the point where I'm done with the first pass and then I can like start a smaller project. Well, it's just draw so like my hand doesn't fall off. And then like a couple hours a week I'll just like fix things. But this has been the hardest one I've ever written, and I think part of it is I'm just like getting older and my brain is just like not as energized to be doing it as hard. Like I'm more mature, I'm smarter, I know like all of the traps of making choices, so there's that. But like I'm making myself quite a weird, I always like think about like building like a house, and now I'm building like a Victorian house with like a weird circular turret on it.
Okay. Instead
of just like a square house. So it's gonna be more complicated, and like ultimately like you can really fall on your sword with stuff like that, of just being like too ambitious and trying to do something way too stupidly hard, and immediately like losing your audience because it's just too frustrating. So I'm trying to stay with the be clear, don't waste my time, like just get to the fucking point card as much as I can so it stays pitch perfect. So
Did you say you want this to be 250 pages?
We're looking at like 300 right now.
Okay, 300. Okay.
And like time under tension was like 260, so it's not unheard of for me.
20% more of a book. Yeah. Okay.
I would love to edit more of it out. I would love to subtract when I get to the end. We'll see though.
Listen, that'll only make it better.
Right.
Because you're just because what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to see areas where you can combine things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I can make this do for two things. And then that really will kind of, make it toastier. Purified. Yes.
But, we'll get there soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, how long have you been working on your book?
I started the first draft in March.
Okay.
March or April. And then I blazed out to about 60,000 words, and then life. And now I'm at 70-ish thousand words, and I need to get the last 20 done so I can get back and revise it and write the book again.
Okay.
Which is, it's fun. I mean, I like revising. I do. It's a great challenge. I don't mind drafting at all, but there's a next level of fun. There are very different behaviors in my head.
It feels like a much more succinct math problem, as opposed to just like get to the end. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I made a sort of a goal for myself. I said I need to figure out how to write the books quicker, and so I outlined. What I didn't realize is during COVID, I was in between drafts on a previous book, and I'm like, oh, I'll outline. I'll give myself a month or so, and I'll outline another book. So I did that, but I didn't realize that I was making a railroad, and I had all my ties and I'm laying track, and then I got to where things started slowing down, and I realized, oh, I don't have any more ties.
Right.
They're just flags posted out into the distance, and I don't really. So it really slowed me down. So I stopped, got back into the outlining thing, outlined the whole thing. I'm like, I got it. And then that's when I was like, oh, I'm also, I've allowed the tar to seep up, and now I have to.
That's where I was last week. Cause yeah, I ran out of ties, and I was like, okay, well, we need to completely go back through and find where we started out, and then be like, okay, here's where all these things don't have an ending. Like, let's figure that out. So, once you get back to the outline, it's you at least feel like you're out of the tar a little bit.
Yeah. I'm not anxious about it. I mean, I would prefer to be done, but I'm not anxious about it because I know that it's not. I've done it so many times before that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's just that I'm, I've spent a fair amount of my time in my life beating myself up on things that I'm like, you know what? There's nothing to beat up.
Right.
I'm okay. Like, no one's getting shot in the face, so let's just be okay.
Yeah, and I'm kind of waiting around trying to not sign anything or like, pitch anything about it yet, because I'm like, what if I just took my time? Like, got it all the way figured out, and then I don't have anyone. I'm not beholden to literally anyone about this. I can just let it be. So,
which dovetails perfectly into my next question. How long do you think it's going to take you to do the book?
I'm telling these people I'm applying to grants for that, like, I'd like it to be like out in like probably like fall of 2028. I feel like that's manageable considering what I've done before. It's the kind of thing where, I just got married. If I want to have a kid soon, if that's something that I'm gonna foray into, like, I can't.
That'll definitely cut into your drawing time. Just a bit.
Well, and see, like, I've talked to other parent cartoonists who are like, when they're a newborn, they kind of don't do shit. So it's not that bad when they're, you think the baby will be born and then suddenly you're gonna have no drawing time, which is like, not that you want to draw immediately, but it's like when they start walking around and shit, that's when you're fucked. And if you don't have like everything already kind of figured out, as far as like, if you're gonna be so tired you can't think about anything, like, you can't write, so you can draw if you know what you're gonna draw, but it's also just knowing yourself, being like, okay, I'm gonna give myself a whole extra year because I don't want to have to worry about being beholden to someone about it, right? So
totally.
I just want to enjoy having a family or something. So that's all theoretical at this point, but like, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be doing some light personal training. I'm going to try and teach less. I've got my space. Like, I'm pretty productive when I'm in here. So I think that, given I'd like to do a couple more complicated pages, like I had a handful of them in Time and Retention, I'd like to do a couple more in this one. And not be like, this is the rate I work at, Those are really fun. I like working gigantic. It's so annoying to take anywhere to work anywhere else, but that's the joy of like having a flat file now and like having my own space. So,
are your pages like, are you doing regular standard 10 by 15, or are you doing
most of them that are not spreads are like that. I think I have that family page like sitting out, but it's just kind of out of reach. It's like 18 by 30 or something.
Okay.
And then the giant screen print I just did was, I don't even know, it was like a table mat basically. So
nice.
I'm sure if I go any much bigger, it's gonna reduce down so poorly that it will not be good. But I'm like,
it's a challenge.
It's so fun when I can just draw on a big placemat, and I feel like a little kid, just like at Applebee's, like doing this on like a tiny amount of paper. So
I totally get that. Yeah. And I guess just closing things up, like what are your favorite tools that you like to use? Like, do you have a
look, if I'm gonna use a nib, I'll use a G nib, I'll use a zebra pen. My pens got discontinued the other day.
Oh,
have you ever heard of this happening? Any of the Kuretake brothers?
The Kuretake, which is like sort of that semi-soft tip.
So these are now these ones, and then these ones are now, they don't make them anymore. So if you use them,
interesting. No, I don't have any favorite. I used these for a while. These sort of like
the zebra ones,
yeah.
So these are great. They're cheaper than the Tombow. I think the Tombow is a little bit better, but these are cheaper, so they're nice.
Okay.
No, I went, and for like this last project I did, this like big screen printing project, I was like, well, let me use this as an excuse to like find my replacement pen, and I think I've landed on the Coco Eero, which like has like a pen holder, but what you do for like the replacement ones is you get like these guys. I think these are actually better than the Kuretake. I was really happy with like how long they lasted. The quality of the nib, like I drew a giant placemat with one and it's not dead yet, which I would use one of these to do lettering, and I feel like after like just a couple pages of like intense dialogue, the nibs just kind of a foregone conclusion, and they're not like, you know, they're like a couple bucks a pen, so it sucks. But I'll use that. I'll use non-photo glue. I'll use China markers for like my weird texture bits, but yeah, I'm probably gonna work more with nibs in this next book too. That's another fun thing that I'm like really excited to do. So.
It's been a million years, but I remember like with the lettering with nibs, you would take the nib and then you would sand it a bit like at an angle, like flat and at a bit of an angle to do the lettering. Do you have an Ames guide? Have you used it?
I freehand mine, which is crazy because like my students are like, I've screamed at them like, you need to use your lettering guide, and that's, I mean, like a core part of the curriculum at the school. But like then I'm like, you know, the bad teacher is like, I don't really use it. So I mean, maybe I will in the future. I think that there's definitely times where my shit's lopsided looking, but like I think it passes fine enough where it's not the end of the world. And it kind of looks like my lines anyway, so it's kind of nice. Yeah. But no, I use the Kuretake for that, so I actually have to see like with the Coco Eero if it like really feels good enough to use that for lettering too. But yeah, I don't know. I will be doing a lot more creative lettering as far as making big crazy bubble letters or. I'm already like, oh, it's so time consuming and fun. But yeah, I'll probably be researching just like old techniques for how they did that prior to just you know, buying a font pack and applying that however you need to, so that way I can make it look good.
I think that's awesome. Your pages are pretty complex. How do you think on average does it take you to bang out a page?
If it's not something super complicated and it's kind of just like characters talking with a couple backgrounds, it's probably, I don't know, between like 4 and 8 hours. Usually not more than 10. Probably more on the low side of that if there really isn't that much going on the page. But I'm not doing nearly as many like light tabling passes as I used to. Sometimes I do because I know I want to really stick the landing, but yeah, I mean, the more stuff in there, the longer it takes because I don't trace it, and I usually end up having to redraw it like 3 times. So it's a lot.
That's what happens. Yeah. I really can't wait to read the next book whenever you do get it finished because I thoroughly enjoyed Time Under Tension.
Thank you. I'm just excited to crack on a new thing, and I'll have plenty of little rinky-dinky kind of DIY shit here and there, I'm sure. But thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's been fun.
Yeah, this is an absolute pleasure, and hopefully our paths will cross maybe at a show one day.
I want to go to Heroes Con one of these days. I still haven't done that one, and I've only heard that it's just the best, most amazing show ever. So.
We'll have to figure out how to get you on their radar because get to hang out with Noah, and you can hang out with Kayla, you know, all the cool kids.
All the cool memoir people. I would love to do that. So it would be really fun to get down there one of these days.
It's a great show. You absolutely love it. Well, good luck on the project.
You too, dude. Good luck writing a fucking book.
Yeah, it's fine. Before I can do it again, I just got to get it done.
It'll happen.
All right, MS. Thanks so much.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your summer.